The lilies at my husband's funeral still smelled sweet when my son leaned in and whispered, "I won't take care of you, Mom." Still, I smiled. Like grief had made me deaf. As the minister's voice blurred into background prayer, I folded the will inside my purse, his name already crossed out. While the stained glass scattered colors over his father's coffin, I realized blood only binds the unprepared. The same light hit his face when he walked away, certain he'd won. That's when I decided the inheritance would teach him what love never could. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The chapel smelled faintly of lilies and old wood polish. The morning light, filtered through stained glass, scattered soft colors across the pews. Marilyn Drake stood near the casket, her hands clasped so tightly around a folded piece of paper that her knuckles had gone white. 46 years of marriage reduced to an urn of flowers, a polished oak box, and a silence that felt too loud. The minister's voice was gentle but detached, as if he'd already performed 3 other funerals that week. He spoke of faith, of peace, of life beyond the horizon. Marilyn listened, but the words slid past her, dissolving into the hum of the air vents. Her eyes stayed on the coffin. She had chosen the navy suit herself, pressed it that morning, and almost laughed at how wrong it looked on him. Too formal, too stiff. Frank would have complained about the tie. When it was her turn to speak, she didn't need to look at the paper. She stepped forward, heels quiet on the carpet, and faced the rows of faces, neighbors, distant relatives, church friends who whispered with polite sorrow. In the second row, Todd sat slouched, phone glowing in his palm, his thumbs moved with steady rhythm, head bowed not in mourning but in scrolling. Marilyn began softly, her voice clear but worn around the edges. Frank Drake was a man who liked his routines. He made the same breakfast every morning. He read the paper cover to cover. He could fix almost anything except maybe the things that mattered most. A ripple of awkward laughter passed through the crowd, thin and nervous. She smiled faintly, as if she hadn't expected any. He wasn't perfect, but for all his faults, he showed up. He built this life with me, board by board, day by day. 46 years. It sounds like forever until it's not. She looked at Todd just for a moment. He didn't notice. She went on. I used to think that love meant patience. I still do. But maybe it also means knowing when to stop waiting for someone to change. Frank never listened much when I spoke, but I like to think. She paused, the silence thick around her. I like to think he hears me now. Her voice broke slightly at the end, not from grief, but exhaustion. The kind that seeps into the bones and stays there. She nodded toward the minister, folded her paper again, and returned to her seat. The service ended with hymns she barely heard. When the casket was carried out, she stayed seated, watching the dust dance in the sunbeams, small motes swirling like ghosts that refused to settle. At the reception hall, paper plates and store-bought cookies filled the tables. The coffee was weak, the punch too sweet. People spoke in careful, hushed tones, the kind that fill space but mean nothing. Todd approached only after most of the guests had left. He wore a dark suit that didn't fit quite right, too narrow at the shoulders, too short at the cuffs. He looked older than she remembered, but there was still that same impatience in his eyes. He found her by the punch bowl, stirring the bright red liquid as if she were thinking of something else entirely. "Mom," he said, his tone brisk, rehearsed. "Just so we're clear, I won't be taking care of you. I've got my own family now." The sentence hit the air like a stone breaking glass. No hesitation, no apology. Just fact. Marilyn looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time that day. The boy who once refused to go to bed without her reading 2 stories. The teenager who slammed doors and said he couldn't wait to leave. The man now speaking to her like she was a bill he needed to pay off. She nodded once, slowly. "Thank you for your honesty." He frowned, confused by her calm. "I just don't want there to be any misunderstanding later." "There won't be," she said, turning back to the punch bowl. The ladle clinked against the rim, a small, steady sound that seemed louder than it should. Todd hovered for another second, waiting for an argument that never came, then walked away to check his phone again. Gloria, one of her church friends, had been stacking empty cups nearby. She stepped closer, her voice low. "You okay?" Marilyn smiled, a quiet, almost peaceful smile. "He just saved me a lot of trouble." Gloria looked puzzled, but Marilyn didn't explain. She placed her cup down and stared out the window, where the wind had picked up, tossing the fallen leaves across the parking lot. For the first time all day, she felt something close to relief. Frank was gone. Todd had drawn his line. The world, stripped of all its noise and pretending, suddenly felt simpler. She straightened her shoulders, touched the pearl brooch pinned at her collar, and walked toward the exit. The sun had dipped low, spilling orange across the church steps. Marilyn paused at the door, took one last look inside, and whispered, "Not to Frank, not to anyone. Time to start over." Then she stepped into the fading light, leaving the empty echoes of the day behind her. The law office smelled faintly of coffee and copier ink, a sterile kind of comfort Marilyn had come to appreciate. She sat in the client chair, the leather cracked from decades of elbows and decisions, and placed a worn manila folder on the desk between them. The tab read, "Final Revision," in her neat, looping hand. Ray Holloway adjusted his glasses and studied her face before reaching for the folder. "You sure you want to do this, Marilyn?" His voice carried that mixture of concern and calculation lawyers learned to perfect. "I wouldn't be here if I wasn't," she said. Her tone was calm, stripped of hesitation. He opened the folder and scanned the first page. "So, the house goes to the Haven Shelter," she finished for him. "They're expanding, and they need a family residence for transitional housing. It's big enough for 3, maybe 4 families at a time." Ray leaned back in his chair. "You do realize Todd's name was on the initial transfer. If you make this change, he'll contest it." Marilyn folded her hands in her lap, unbothered. Let him try. The clock on the wall ticked between them. It was nearly noon, and the thin winter light pressed through the blinds in narrow gold slats. She could see dust floating in the air, tiny glints like suspended time. "Frank and I built that house," she said softly, her gaze distant. "But it was never his, not really. He loved the walls, the yard, the idea of ownership, but not what lived inside it. Not us. He kept a roof, but not a home. Maybe it's time that place finally becomes one." Ray nodded slowly. "Then we'll move forward. You'll need to initial here, and on the last page." She took the pen he slid across the desk, the same black one she'd used to sign her marriage license 46 years ago. Funny how the weight of a pen could feel heavier with time. The nib scratched softly against the paper, each signature a small defiance against the expectations that had tethered her for too long. When she was done, Ray gathered the pages into a neat stack. "And the power of attorney adjustments. Gloria," she said. "I'm naming her my agent. She's steady, she listens." "You trust her?" Marilyn smiled faintly. "More than I trust blood." He didn't argue. Instead, he handed her another form, sliding it toward her with a nod. "And the healthcare proxy?" "Same, Gloria." Ray filled in the blanks, his pen clicking rhythmically. "All right, this makes it official." Marilyn leaned back, exhaling slowly. It was the kind of breath she hadn't taken in years, the kind that came when something unspoken finally unclenched. Ray gathered the signed pages and placed them into a fresh envelope. "I'll file these today. Expect some noise from Todd once he finds out." "I'm counting on it," she said, standing. Silence was worse. Later that afternoon, the sun hung low and red over Maple Street as Marilyn pulled into her driveway. The house stood quiet, shutters half drawn, the same as always, but the air around it felt different now. Lighter, Gloria's car was already in the drive. She met Marilyn at the porch with 2 steaming coffees in paper cups. "You did it?" she asked, eyes bright. "I did." They sat side by side on the porch swing, the wood creaking gently beneath them. Gloria handed her one of the cups. "How does it feel?" Marilyn took a sip, the coffee sharp and hot on her tongue. "It feels overdue," Gloria laughed softly. "Good overdue or bad overdue?" "The kind that should have happened 10 years ago." The swing rocked quietly. A bird called from the maple tree, and the wind carried the faint smell of rain. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "You know," Gloria said, "I think Frank would have respected this. In his own stubborn way." Marilyn didn't answer right away. Her gaze drifted toward the upstairs window, his old study. The curtains were drawn, just like he'd always kept them, to keep out distractions. That night, after Gloria left, Marilyn stood in the dim living room, a single lamp casting soft amber light across the mantel. Frank's framed photo rested there, the one from their 40th anniversary. His smile was polite, almost perfunctory. His hand resting on her shoulder, she picked up the frame, ran her thumb over the glass. "I'm doing this for us," she whispered. The clock ticked in the silence, a faint echo of the office clock hours earlier. Somewhere deep in the house, the floor creaked as if the old timbers themselves exhaled in agreement. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall, gentle, deliberate, cleansing. The porch light flickered once, then steadied. Marilyn set the frame back on the mantel and turned off the lamp. For the first time in years, the dark didn't feel empty. It felt earned. The email came on a Tuesday morning, time-stamped 6:47 a.m., the kind of hour when people write things they don't want to say aloud. Subject, quick check-in. Marilyn clicked it open without thinking. "Hi, Mom. Just wanted to follow up about the estate paperwork. Kendra's been looking at our budget for next year and wants to make sure everything is still aligned. She's big on planning. Let me know where things stand so we can budget accordingly." Fateh Pro. "No. How are you?" No mention of the funeral, the weather, or the way she might be sleeping these days. Just budget accordingly. She stared at the glowing screen in the dim kitchen, the morning light barely brushing the counters. The coffee maker burbled behind her, low and steady, like it knew not to interrupt. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, then typed slowly, deliberately. Everything is being handled appropriately. She reread it once, cold, precise, unshakable, and hit send. Then she poured herself a cup of coffee, black, no sugar. By mid-morning, Gloria dropped by unannounced with a tin of lemon bars and the same cautious smile she'd worn since the funeral. "You see the email?" she asked, setting the tin on the counter. Marilyn raised an eyebrow. "How could I not? The man must think the internet was invented for him." Gloria chuckled, but her eyes stayed sharp. "He's circling like a hawk." "Let him circle," Marilyn said, taking a bite of the lemon bar. "There's nothing left on the bone." The words came out clean and dry, like a door quietly closing. That afternoon she met Ray again at his office. The rain had cleared, leaving the parking lot slick and silver. She shook off her umbrella before stepping inside. Ray looked up from his desk. "Morning, Marilyn. You're early." "I've waited long enough for other people in my life," she replied, taking her seat. He smiled faintly and opened the thick folder that had become her story's archive. Drafts, signatures, official seals. Everything's finalized today. The trust splits evenly. Half to the local charities we discussed, a quarter to Lily's education fund, and the remainder for your end-of-life care. Marilyn nodded. "That sounds right. You sure about removing Todd completely?" Her eyes flicked toward the window. Outside, a pair of robins darted across the wet pavement. "I'm sure," she said. "He already took what he wanted. My piece isn't part of his inheritance." Ray hesitated for a moment, then slid the documents across. "Initial here." She signed each page without looking up. The rhythm steady, practiced. When the last sheet was done, she capped the pen with a decisive click. Ray gathered the papers. "That's it. It's done." "Good," she said, standing. "Let's keep it that way." At home that evening, the house felt unusually quiet. Not empty, but deliberate, as if it approved of what she'd done. The rain had started again, tapping against the windows like faint applause. She went to the study, Frank's old domain, now a hollow of memories and dust. The desk was clean except for one object, a thick envelope marked Original Will. Todd's handwriting sprawled across the front, bold and possessive. She remembered that day 5 years ago. Todd had insisted on helping her draft it. "Makes sense, Mom," he'd said, his voice coated in charm. "I'm just trying to make things easier for you." She had believed him then. Or maybe she had just been tired. Marilyn sat down, the chair creaking under her. She slit the envelope open with a letter opener, Frank's old one, its handle worn smooth from use, and pulled out the pages. She read the first line, then stopped. The inked words looked foreign now, belonging to another woman entirely, someone who still thought love could be earned by loyalty. She fed the first page into the shredder. The machine groaned to life, slow and hungry. The paper disappeared in strips, curling into gray ribbons. Page after page, she fed it through, Todd's carefully crafted clauses, his promises disguised as protection. Each sheet vanished with a dry, mechanical purr, until all that remained was confetti at her feet. She unplugged the shredder, emptied the bin into the fireplace, and watched the scraps catch flame. The ink blistered, the edges curled inward, the paper collapsing into glowing coals. Her reflection shimmered in the glass cover, steady, composed, untrembling. Gloria had called earlier, asking if she wanted to meet for dinner. Marilyn had said no. Some goodbyes needed to be done alone. When the last flame winked out, she reached for the small photo frame on the mantel, Frank and her, younger, in the half-built shell of this very house. He was smiling, sawdust in his hair, a hammer in his hand. She was laughing, though she couldn't remember why. She touched the glass lightly. "It's all handled," she said. In the silence that followed, something inside the walls shifted. A gentle pop from the wood settling, or maybe something less explainable. The air felt lighter again, the way it had after rain. Then her phone chimed. A new email. Subject: urgent. Call me now. From Todd. Marilyn stared at the screen, unread. The clock ticked once, sharp and clean. Then she pressed delete. And for the first time, the house didn't echo his name back at her. The text arrived 2 mornings later, long enough for silence to stretch into something deliberate. "Hey Mom, it's Kendra. Hope you're doing okay. We've been thinking it might be nice if you came out for a bit. See the kids, get a change of scenery. You could use the guest room. Let me know what works for you." Marilyn read it twice, sipping her coffee as if the message were something to be swallowed carefully. The phone screen glowed faintly in the gray morning light, the same kind that made the kitchen tiles look colder than they were. She set the phone face down beside the mug and went back to stirring her oatmeal. 48 hours passed before she responded. "I'm quite fine here," that was all. No emojis, no pleasantries, no invitation for more. The next day, another text blinked in. "Just trying to be thoughtful," Kendra wrote. "Didn't mean to overstep." Marilyn typed her reply slowly, her fingers deliberate. "Thank you, but I have everything I need." She pressed send, then set the phone aside again. The message ticked away into silence. By the time Gloria arrived that afternoon, Marilyn was pruning the rose bush by the porch, sleeves rolled to her elbows. The sky hung low and heavy, the air smelling faintly of damp earth. "Let me guess," Gloria said, holding up a grocery bag with 2 iced teas clinking inside. "Kendra?" Marilyn looked up, her eyes amused but tired. She extended an invitation. Gloria snorted. "Translation? You're not needed, just expected." "That's about right." Marilyn clipped another stem. The soft snip of metal sounded final. Funny how people mistake guilt for kindness. Gloria passed her one of the iced teas. "What did you tell her?" "That I have everything I need." "Good." Gloria smiled, taking a seat on the porch step. "You always did." Marilyn joined her, dusting her gloves on her jeans. They sat quietly for a while, watching a cardinal dart through the yard. Somewhere down the street, a lawnmower started, its steady hum fading into the background. "You really okay, Mar?" Gloria asked after a moment. Marilyn looked toward the house, toward the living room window where the curtains swayed faintly in the draft. "For the first time, I think I might be." That evening, the laptop screen glowed pale in the dark study. Marilyn scrolled through her accounts, one by one, deleting Todd's name from every joint listing. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat at the edge of each confirmation screen. "Are you sure you want to remove this user?" "Yes," she whispered to the empty room. "I'm sure." She changed her passwords next. Banking, utilities, even the grocery delivery app. Each new one was a small, quiet rebellion, a reclamation. When she was done, she printed the confirmation pages, folded them neatly, and placed them in a folder marked Current Affairs. Not family, not emergency, just current. Her reflection in the computer screen looked different, lighter somehow, not younger but less burdened. The next morning, Marilyn stood at the edge of the backyard garden, Frank's old plot. The soil was still damp from last night's drizzle. She knelt down, pressing her hands into the earth, cool and rich and alive. The flower bed had been neglected for years, overrun with weeds that clung stubbornly to the roots of what once grew there. She pulled them out one by one, the smell of wet soil rising with every tug. From a small paper bag, she took 2 packets of seeds, lilies and forget-me-nots. She poured them carefully into her palm, tiny specks of promise. New tenants, she said softly, scattering them across the soil. The wind shifted, lifting a strand of her hair. She pressed the seeds into the ground, smoothed the dirt over them, and sat back on her heels. Gloria's words echoed in her mind. "You really okay, Mar?" She thought of Kendra's text, of Todd's silence, of the house finally humming in its own rhythm again. "Quite fine," she murmured. "Better than fine." She wiped her hands on her jeans and looked toward the porch. A faint light blinked on her phone. A new notification, unread. She left it there, glowing softly against the wood. The breeze picked up, scattering petals from last season's roses across the grass. The scent of them mingled with the sharp green of fresh soil. Marilyn took off her gloves and dug her fingers into the dirt once more, feeling its coolness against her skin. Above her, the clouds began to break, and sunlight spilled across the garden. The light touched the empty porch, the quiet house, the rows of newly planted flowers. She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that came not from joy but from certainty. Behind her, the phone buzzed again, 2 short vibrations, insistent. She didn't turn around. Instead, Marilyn pressed one last handful of soil into the earth and whispered, "Grow." The wind carried the word away, light as breath. And for the first time, the garden didn't feel like Frank's anymore. It felt like hers. The call came mid-afternoon, when the air outside hummed with the steady drone of cicadas. Marilyn had just finished washing her hands after tending the garden. The soil still clung faintly to her nails when the phone began to vibrate on the counter, Todd's name lighting up the screen. She stared at it for a moment before answering. "Hello, Todd." He didn't waste time on greetings. "Mom, I got a notice from the county clerk. Something about revised estate filings? You didn't think you should tell me?" Her voice was even, almost gentle. "All decisions are final." "Final?" His laugh was sharp, incredulous. "So you're what, cutting me out because I set boundaries?" She leaned against the counter, watching the sunlight stripe across the kitchen floor. "You're not being punished," she said quietly. "I'm just done funding disrespect." There was a pause, just long enough for his breath to shift. "You think you're teaching me a lesson? Because this isn't one of your little church luncheons where people pat you on the back for being noble." Marilyn closed her eyes. She could picture him pacing, phone pressed tight to his ear, the old impatience still simmering just beneath his polished tone. "I'm not trying to teach you anything," she said. "You already taught me enough." He scoffed. "This is ridiculous. You're acting like I've done something terrible." "No," she said softly. "You've done something ordinary. You've forgotten who helped you get here." The line went quiet except for the faint static of distance. Then, with a quick exhale, half sigh, half snarl, Todd hung up. Marilyn stood there for a long moment, listening to the silence that followed. It was oddly satisfying, like a door finally closing all the way. That evening, the faint buzz of her phone pulled her back to the screen. A social media post from Kendra appeared on her feed. The kind of passive declaration that tries to sound wise, but bleeds with pettiness. A gentle reminder, family is complicated. Be kind, even when it's hard. The caption ended with a heart emoji and 3 likes. Marilyn chuckled quietly. "Of course," she murmured. She closed the app and set the phone face down. The next morning, Gloria arrived with 2 coffees, her hair pinned up and sunglasses perched on her head. She waved the cups like trophies as she climbed the porch steps. "I saw Kendra's little sermon online," she said, handing Marilyn the stronger brew. "You'd think vague booking was a spiritual practice." Marilyn smiled, taking a sip. "She and Todd make quite the team. He throws the stones, she polishes them for public display." Gloria laughed. "So how'd the call go?" Marilyn looked out toward the garden, where the first green shoots of lilies had started to break the soil. He hung up. Gloria lifted her cup in a toast. "Then cheers to that. You finally hung up first." Marilyn turned toward her, the corner of her mouth lifting. "I didn't hang up," she said. I disconnected the line. The words landed with quiet weight, the kind that needed no explanation. They sat in comfortable silence, sipping coffee while the morning light filtered through the porch rails. Across the yard, the forget-me-nots swayed gently in the breeze. Later that day, Marilyn went to the hall closet and found an old cordless phone tucked in a basket of forgotten electronics. She turned it over in her hands, its plastic body yellowed with age, the battery long dead. She smiled, then set it down beside the landline base on the counter. With a single, deliberate motion, she unplugged the cord from the wall. The faint click of disconnection echoed in the kitchen. No more surprise calls. No more explanations. She placed the phone in the trash bin, covered it with yesterday's newspaper, and washed her hands. The water ran cool and clear, rinsing away the faint trace of soil still caught beneath her nails. From the window above the sink, she could see the garden again, the lilies stretching toward the light, the forget-me-nots beginning to unfurl. The phone stayed silent. Marilyn reached for her mug, now lukewarm, and took a slow sip. "I'm done answering," she said to no one in particular. The wind outside rattled the window just enough to sound like approval. It was late Saturday morning when Marilyn heard the soft knock on the door. 2 quick taps, then one hesitant one. She recognized the rhythm immediately. Only one person in the family still knocked like that. When she opened the door, Lily stood there, bundled in a light denim jacket despite the mild weather, her hair pulled back in a loose braid. She held a small canvas tote, its edges bulging awkwardly with something metallic. "Hey, Grandma," Lily said, a bit out of breath. "Mom said you might still have the old baking pans, the ones with the flower patterns." Marilyn smiled. "I might. Come in before the breeze steals your manners." Lily stepped inside, the faint scent of citrus shampoo trailing after her. The house felt instantly different, warmer somehow. Marilyn noticed the girl's eyes flicker around the kitchen, the way people do when they return to a place that still remembers them. "I was going to make shortbread for Dad's birthday," Lily said, setting the tote down. "Mom bought new pans, but the cookies never come out right. Yours always tasted better." "Could be the pans," Marilyn said. "Could also be patience." Lily grinned, her smile shy but genuine. "Can I borrow them? Or maybe bake here?" Marilyn hesitated for half a breath, then nodded. "Flour's in the cupboard. Butter's already softening on the counter." The kitchen filled with the gentle rhythm of small talk and soft laughter. The smell of butter and sugar clung to the air, blending with the faint sweetness of the lilies outside the window. Marilyn guided Lily through the steps, measuring, mixing, pressing dough into familiar shapes. "You always said shortbread's about restraint," Lily said, dusting flour from her hands. "That's true," Marilyn said, cutting clean lines through the dough. "You don't rush it. You let it rest." "Kind of like you," Lily teased. Marilyn chuckled. "Maybe." They slid the tray into the oven. The heat fogged the glass slightly, turning their reflections into soft outlines. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. Then, out of nowhere, Lily said quietly, "I miss being here." The words caught Marilyn off guard. "Do you?" she asked, voice low. Lily nodded, brushing her braid back. "Mom and Dad fight a lot now, mostly about money, but also about you. It's weird. Everyone keeps saying you're being difficult, but I don't think that's true." Marilyn felt something in her chest shift, an ache, small but sharp. "People see what they need to justify," she said. "But you don't have to pick sides, sweetheart. Just bake your cookies." Lily gave her a small, grateful smile. "I'm glad you're not mad at me." "Never." Marilyn wiped her hands, then crossed to the drawer where she kept her old photo albums. She pulled out a small framed picture, Frank, younger and sunburned, holding baby Lily in his arms. His grin was wide and unguarded, the kind she hadn't seen in years before he died. Lily's face lit up. "Is that me?" "That's you," Marilyn said. "Your grandfather couldn't believe how loud you were for someone that small. Said you had lungs built for opera." Lily laughed softly. "Can I keep this?" Marilyn nodded. "Of course. He'd want you to have it." She didn't explain anything about the trust, the will, or the money that would someday quietly make Lily's life easier. None of that mattered now. What mattered was this: flour dusting the air, butter melting in the heat, and her granddaughter's laughter echoing through the house like it belonged here again. When the timer dinged, Lily pulled out the tray with careful hands. The shortbread was golden at the edges. Perfect. They smell just like I remember, she said. Marilyn handed her a cooling rack. Good memory, then. They waited for the cookies to set, sipping lemonade from chipped glasses. The quiet between them was the kind that felt earned, not empty. When it was time for Lily to leave, she packed the cookies into a tin and slipped the framed photo carefully on top. Thanks, Grandma, she said, hugging her tightly, for the pans, for everything. Marilyn held her for an extra beat. You come by any time, no excuses needed. I will, Lily said, smiling as she stepped out into the sunlight. Marilyn watched from the doorway as her granddaughter crossed the yard, the tin balanced under her arm, the braid catching bits of sunlight like gold thread. Behind her, the oven ticked as it cooled, and the smell of baked sugar lingered. Gloria arrived just as Lily's car disappeared down the street, 2 coffees in hand as always. I saw her leave, she said, handing one over. That girl's your real legacy, Marilyn smiled, her gaze still fixed on the fading outline of the car. And she's the only one who never asked for anything. Gloria took a sip, eyes soft. That's what makes her worth everything. Marilyn turned back to the kitchen, where a few crumbs sparkled on the counter like bits of sunlight. She brushed them away and set the empty tray in the sink. The house smelled of butter, warmth, and something gentler than peace, something like continuation. Outside, the lilies swayed in the breeze, and for the first time in weeks, Marilyn felt the faintest tug of something close to joy. The letter arrived on pale blue paper, crisp and official-looking, the kind of envelope that pretends to be polite while carrying an insult. It was addressed to Ms. Marilyn Drake in Todd's handwriting, though someone else had typed the return address from his office in Chicago. Inside was a single page, clipped to a printed form. Request for access to medical information, for future planning and family coordination. She read it twice, then a third time, her jaw tightening a little more with each pass. There it was again, future planning, his favorite phrase. Todd had always liked the illusion of control, dressed up as concern. Marilyn folded the page neatly back into its envelope, placed it on the counter beside the coffee pot, and dialed Ray's office. Ray Holloway, came the voice on the other end. It's Marilyn, she said. He's at it again. Let me guess, Ray replied, weary amusement coloring his tone. Something about your records. For future planning, she quoted, dry as dust. He sighed. I'll file a formal denial. Your healthcare proxy's airtight. Gloria's name is on everything. He doesn't have a legal leg to stand on. I figured, she said. But it's not the leg I'm worried about. It's the nerve. Ray chuckled softly. I'll send you the confirmation once it's submitted. Thank you, Ray. After hanging up, Marilyn stood in the stillness of the kitchen for a long moment. The lilies outside the window had opened wider since yesterday. Their pale petals caught the morning light, unbothered by paperwork or family politics. She exhaled through her nose. He wants the power, she murmured, not the responsibility. By afternoon, Gloria was at her door again, this time carrying a basket of laundry and a half-dozen stories from the neighborhood. She spotted the envelope on the counter and frowned. What's this nonsense? Marilyn handed it over. A request. Apparently, my health is now a matter of family coordination. Gloria set the letter down with deliberate care. He thinks he can override loyalty with blood. That's exactly it, Marilyn said. He keeps confusing biology for entitlement. Gloria poured herself some coffee and took a seat at the kitchen table. You'd think after all this time, he'd get that control isn't the same as care. Marilyn smiled faintly, leaning against the counter. Some people never outgrow the idea that love is supposed to come with an account number. They sat quietly for a bit, the house creaking softly around them. Outside, a cardinal landed on the porch railing, cocked its head, and then darted away again. Gloria broke the silence. What are you going to do about it? Marilyn didn't hesitate. Clarify. The following morning, she drove to Ray's office, a slim folder tucked under her arm. The air outside was crisp and cool, the kind that hinted at summer's retreat. Ray looked up as she entered. That was fast. I'm not giving him another opening, she said, handing him the folder. I want the directive updated, explicitly. If I'm ever hospitalized, Todd isn't to be notified. Gloria's my sole contact. Ray blinked, then nodded. You're certain? Absolutely. He flipped through the pages, his pen tapping lightly on the desk. And this other document? My obituary draft, she said, her tone even. Ray looked up, a flicker of surprise in his expression. You've written one? I like things in order. He opened it and read the first few lines, nodding slowly. You want to remove Todd as next of kin? Yes, she said. He's still listed as such in one of the older versions. I'd rather the paper know who actually stood by me than who happened to be born from me. Ray leaned back, studying her with quiet admiration. You know, most people avoid conversations like this. Marilyn smiled faintly. Most people spend their lives avoiding themselves. He signed where needed, and she added her initials beside the updates. When the ink dried, Ray slid the copies into a fresh envelope and handed it to her. For your records, she tucked it into her bag. It's good to have the last word documented. That evening, the sun dipped low behind the maple trees, washing the house in soft amber light. Marilyn sat at her desk, the new paperwork neatly filed in a labeled drawer. The sound of the garden filtered in through the open window, wind through leaves, crickets beginning their slow chorus. She picked up the phone once, out of habit, then set it back down. There was no one she needed to call. No one who could claim the right to know anything more than what she chose to share. The lilies by the window leaned gently toward the fading light. She watched them until the color of the sky shifted from gold to dusk. Gloria had been right. Blood didn't make family. Behavior did. And Marilyn, for the first time in decades, was surrounded only by loyalty she'd chosen. She reached for her pen and wrote one last note in her planner, beneath the date. Directive finalized. No further permissions granted. Then she underlined it twice. A cool wind drifted in through the open window, carrying the faint scent of soil and lilies. Somewhere, a phone buzzed faintly in another room, a leftover echo from a life she no longer answered. Marilyn closed the planner and whispered, almost to herself, "Not everything born of me belongs to me." And as the house settled into its quiet rhythm, that truth finally sounded like freedom. Monday arrived with the sound of rain against the windows, steady, unhurried, deliberate. Marilyn sat at the dining table, a stack of papers spread neatly before her. The air smelled faintly of printer ink and lemon polish. She slipped the final page into an envelope, sealed it, and pressed her thumb along the fold, as if closing a chapter. The return address read simply, Monsieur Drake. Inside, the notarized letter was concise. 3 paragraphs, free of sentiment. This letter confirms my finalized estate and healthcare designations as of the attached date. All prior versions are void. Please update your records accordingly. No explanations, no apologies. Just the truth. Structured like arithmetic, neat, undeniable, final. She sent copies to Ray, to the bank, to the county office, and one, just one, to Todd's home address. Certified mail, return receipt requested. By the time she returned from the post office, the rain had stopped, leaving the air bright and rinsed. The garden glistened outside her window, every leaf tipped with silver. Gloria arrived around noon, carrying a bag of groceries and her usual running commentary about the world. You really sent it, she asked, eyes widening when Marilyn handed her the stamped receipt. I did, Gloria let out a low whistle. You're the first woman I've seen win an argument by filing it. Marilyn chuckled. It's hard to yell over legal paperwork. They shared a quiet laugh. It wasn't gloating, it was release. Years of imbalance had been recentered with ink and intention. Gloria unpacked the groceries, clattering a jar of pickles onto the counter. You know he'll call. I know, Marilyn said, reaching for a dish towel. And I won't answer. Later that afternoon, while reorganizing an old drawer, Marilyn came across a photo she hadn't seen in decades. It was Frank and Todd standing side by side in front of the half-built garden shed. Todd was maybe 12, his hair too long, his grin half-forced. Frank, hammer in hand, was looking at him, not with pride, but with the critical squint of a man measuring his own reflection. Marilyn traced the edge of the photo with her finger. She remembered taking it, how Todd had tried too hard, how Frank had scolded him for holding the nails wrong. The air in the room thickened. Some memories carried the scent of sawdust and silence. She rose, photo in hand, and walked to the fireplace. The embers from that morning's fire were still faintly warm. She laid the picture across the grate, struck a match, and watched the edges curl inward. Frank's face blackened first, then Todd's grin. The paper arched and folded in on itself before turning to ash. For the first time, she didn't feel guilt, just clarity. That evening, Marilyn drove downtown to the community center. The brick building stood under a flickering street lamp, the smell of damp pavement and coffee drifting from its entrance. Inside, volunteers moved between tables, sorting canned goods and cereal boxes into paper bags. "Need another set of hands?" she asked a woman with a name tag that read Ruth. "Always," Ruth said, smiling. "Grab an apron." Marilyn tied it around her waist and joined the assembly line. She worked quietly, steady, efficient. No small talk, no introductions, just purpose. When the doors opened for distribution, she helped carry boxes to cars, handing out food and smiles in equal measure. A little boy grinned up at her when she slipped an extra cookie packet into his bag. "Thank you, ma'am," he said, his voice small but bright. "Eat them while they're still soft," she replied. By the time the pantry closed, her back ached, but her spirit felt lighter than it had in years. She washed her hands in the utility sink, the scent of soap and sugar mixing in the air. Ruth passed by on her way out. "You coming back next week?" Marilyn nodded. "Every week you'll have me." That night, the kitchen felt alive again. The counter was dusted with flour, the smell of shortbread rising in warm waves. She worked methodically, just butter, sugar, and memory. When the cookies cooled, she placed them in a small tin, lined with parchment, and sealed it with a simple strip of tape. No note, no signature. Then, under the cover of dusk, she drove to Lily's neighborhood. The porch light was on, casting a soft pool of yellow against the step. Marilyn set the tin down quietly, her movements deliberate and careful, like a secret meant to be kept. For a moment, she looked through the window, saw Lily at the kitchen table, headphones in, head bent over her homework. The sight made Marilyn's throat tighten. She smiled, then turned back toward her car. As she drove home, the streetlights blurred in the windshield like streaks of memory. She felt neither sadness nor nostalgia. Only the steadiness of peace earned, not inherited. Back home, the lilies by the window had closed for the night. The house was still, humming with its new kind of quiet. On the table, her planner lay open to a clean page. She picked up her pen and wrote 3 words. All accounts settled. Then she closed it, turned off the lamp, and let the darkness fill the room. Soft, full, and hers alone. The first knock came just after noon, sharp, deliberate, and unmistakably familiar. Marilyn didn't move at first. She stood at the kitchen sink, hands still damp from rinsing out the mixing bowl, watching the shadow shift on the frosted glass of the front door. The second knock came louder, then a pause, then pounding. "Mom," Todd's voice, muffled but agitated. "I know you're in there." Gloria looked up from the kitchen table, where she'd been flipping through the newspaper. She met Marilyn's eyes, already understanding. "You want me to call the police?" Marilyn dried her hands on a towel, calm as the lilies swaying in the window light. "No," she said. "Let him learn what silence sounds like." They both stood still, the only sound in the house the faint hum of the refrigerator. Outside, Todd's voice rose again. "I just want to talk. You can't ignore me forever." Marilyn stepped closer to the window over the sink. From where she stood, she could see the driveway, the expensive car parked crooked at the curb, the driver's door left open, Todd pacing beside it. He looked smaller than she remembered. Not younger, just diminished by his own urgency. "Mom," he shouted again, pounding harder now. The blows echoed through the hallway, dull thuds against solid wood. Marilyn reached for the kettle, filled it, and set it on the stove. "Tea?" she asked quietly. Gloria's lips twitched into a half-smile. "You're impossible." The kettle began to hum. Todd's shouting faded into angry muttering, his words slipping in and out of clarity through the closed door. Something about unfair, something about his rights. Marilyn poured 2 cups of tea, steady and unshaken. She handed one to Gloria, who took it with both hands. They sat side by side at the table, listening to the sounds outside taper off. First the voice, then the footsteps. then nothing but the wind moving through the porch chimes. "He'll give up soon," Gloria said. "He's not used to being unheard," Marilyn replied. They drank their tea slowly. Minutes stretched into 20. Finally, a car door slammed. The engine turned over, sputtered once, and then faded down the street. The quiet that followed wasn't relief, it was confirmation. Marilyn rose, walked to the front hallway, and peered through the peephole. The porch was empty except for a faint scuff mark where he'd kicked the step. A small gust lifted the corner of the welcome mat, then settled it again. She turned the deadbolt once more out of ritual than fear. Later that afternoon, sunlight pooled across the kitchen table. Marilyn sat with her journal open, the pen gliding smoothly over the page. There's no inheritance in expectation, only in effort. She paused, tapping the pen lightly against the margin. Then she added in smaller handwriting beneath it, "And sometimes effort means walking away first." She closed the journal and ran her fingers along the edge of the leather cover. The house smelled faintly of cinnamon, the dough she'd started earlier now rising under a damp towel. She uncovered it, rolled it out on the counter, and began sprinkling sugar and spice, the air warming with the promise of sweetness. The rhythmic motions, the roll, the slice, the pan, brought a peace deeper than reflection. These weren't just cinnamon rolls. They were an offering, a gesture forward. As the oven filled the kitchen with that soft, comforting scent, Gloria leaned in from the doorway. "More for Lily?" Marilyn shook her head. "For the pantry, the people who actually show up." Gloria smiled. "You do realize you're turning charity into art," Marilyn shrugged. "Maybe I just like feeding people who say thank you." When the timer chimed, she pulled the tray from the oven. The rolls were golden and perfect, their spirals glistening under a thin glaze. She packed them into 2 large tins, wrapped them in wax paper, and set them by the door. Outside, the sky had shifted to a soft evening blue, the light slanting low across the yard. Marilyn stood for a moment at the window, watching the last of the sunlight spill across the lilies Frank had planted years ago. They bent gently in the breeze, alive, unbroken, their roots deeper than neglect. She smiled to herself, almost imperceptibly, and whispered, "Some doors don't need to be opened." Then she turned off the lights, picked up the tins, and stepped into the fading day, walking not away from anything, but toward everything that finally felt hers. The article appeared on a Sunday morning, tucked halfway down the front page of the Maple County Chronicle. A feature piece, nothing flashy, just a quiet human interest story about a woman who'd made herself indispensable without asking for recognition. The widow who kept giving after everyone stopped showing up. It began with a photo, Marilyn smiling faintly, her hair pinned neatly back, standing between 2 pantry volunteers. Behind them, rows of canned goods gleamed under fluorescent light. She hadn't even realized Ruth had snapped it. When her husband passed away, Marilyn Drake could have withdrawn from the world. Instead, she showed up at the Maple Street Food Pantry every Tuesday, apron tied and smile steady. In less than a year, she helped expand the program to include a mentorship wing for young women from the Haven Shelter. "She doesn't talk much about her giving," says Pantry Director Ruth Eberly. "She just does it. You'd never guess she's the reason we're still running." Marilyn sat at her kitchen table with the paper open, a half-empty mug of coffee beside her. The morning light slanted through the curtains, soft and forgiving. For a moment, she let herself feel it. The small, private satisfaction of being seen for something real. Then her phone buzzed. Todd Drake shared an article. "Proud of my mom," his caption sat there like a stain on the clean page. Dozens of comments trailed below. "So inspiring. What a wonderful woman. She raised you right, Todd." Marilyn stared at the screen for a long time. Her name, her work, her heart, used again as his currency. She set down the coffee cup, opened her settings, and pressed block. No hesitation, no bitterness. Just the simple click of a boundary. The air felt lighter almost instantly. Later that day, Gloria arrived with a copy of the same paper folded under her arm. "Front page," she said, dropping it on the counter like a trophy. "You're officially local royalty," Marilyn laughed softly. "I suppose that makes you my lady-in-waiting." Gloria poured herself a cup of coffee, shaking her head. "You know he's already posted it, right? With one of those look-at-me captions?" I know, Marilyn said. He's blocked. Gloria froze mid-sip, then grinned. You really did it? Of course. I'm allergic to performance art. Gloria laughed so hard she had to set her cup down. Lord Mar, you are the only woman I know who can make disowning someone sound like dusting furniture. Marilyn smiled faintly, eyes drifting toward the garden through the window. I'm just cleaning the view. By afternoon, the pantry was bustling again. Marilyn arrived with 2 trays of cinnamon rolls, the scent drawing smiles before she even reached the counter. The regulars greeted her by name. There were hugs, laughter, and flour dust on her sleeves before she could even tie on her apron. Celebrity today, Ruth teased, waving the newspaper. You should have seen the calls we got this morning. Donations, volunteers, 3 offers to repaint the building, Marilyn smiled. Then it was worth the ink. More than that, Ruth said, lowering her voice. You've changed this place, Marilyn. You made people care again. Marilyn looked around, the chatter, the soft rhythm of kindness unfolding in real time. Maybe I just reminded them they could. When the shift ended, she stayed behind to wipe down the counters, humming faintly under her breath. The pantry was quiet now. The lights dimmed, but the air was still warm from all that effort. Before leaving, she tucked a small envelope into the donations box. Her own check, written neatly, unsigned on purpose. That night back home, the phone buzzed again. A text this time. Lily, I saw the article. You really are the best. Marilyn read it twice, smiling despite herself. Marilyn, that means more than you know. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Lily, I kept the photo of Grandpa and me on my desk. He looks happy. You do too. Marilyn's eyes softened. She typed, I think we're finally teaching him what peace looks like, then erased it and simply sent a heart emoji. She set the phone down, reached for the folded newspaper, and smoothed it out one last time. The photo caught the glow of the lamp, the woman in it looking content, certain, and quietly untouchable. Marilyn turned off the light and walked to the window. The lilies were luminous in the moonlight, swaying with the night breeze. Somewhere beyond them, she imagined her granddaughter asleep, the picture frame glowing faintly in the dark. The world outside her walls was still noisy, still opinionated, still spinning, but it no longer owned a single part of her story. And in that perfect, gentle stillness, Marilyn whispered to herself, let them read whatever version they want. I already lived the truth. The wind carried her words away, soft, sure, and gone, before morning. The late afternoon sun slanted through the kitchen curtains, painting soft stripes across the table. Marilyn sat with a single cream envelope before her, its flap unsealed, her handwriting centered and deliberate. For Lily, someday. She heard the knock on the door and smiled before she turned. Lily never knocked more than once, just enough to be polite. Come in, sweetheart, she called. Lily stepped inside, holding a folder of college brochures. Mom said I should drop these off for you to see. She thinks you'd be proud. I already am, Marilyn said, motioning to the chair beside her. Sit, I've got something for you. Lily set the folder down, her eyes curious. Marilyn slid the envelope across the table. For someday, she said. Not now, Lily frowned gently. Is it about the will? Marilyn chuckled. No, it's about what doesn't fit in one. Lily tilted her head, but didn't press. She tucked the envelope into her bag like it was something fragile. You'll know when to open it, Marilyn added. Okay, Lily said softly. I'll take care of it. Marilyn smiled. I know you will. That night, after Lily had gone, Marilyn sat at her desk with a second sheet of paper, one that would stay sealed inside the envelope. Her pen moved slowly, the words forming without effort. Dear Lily, you chose kindness without expecting anything. That's rarer than most people admit. You listened when others performed. You gave without waiting to be thanked. That's the legacy I wanted to leave. Not the house, not the money, not the garden. Just that knowing goodness has weight. Someday you'll need to stand your ground the way I did. When that day comes, don't look for applause. Silence is often the loudest kind of respect. All my love, Grandma. She folded it carefully and sealed it. The sound of paper against paper felt like the closing of a door that didn't need to lock. The following morning, Gloria and Ray met her at the kitchen table for what they both called the final sweep. Ray spread the documents out like a card dealer. his expression the professional kind of satisfied. No gaps, he said, no access points, no loopholes. Gloria added with a smirk. Translation, he's out of tricks. Marilyn nodded, serene. Good. Then this time, we're finished for real. Ray tapped the stack once, neatly. Everything's clean, Marilyn. Your wishes will hold exactly as written. She reached across the table, resting her hand briefly on his. Thank you, Ray, for making sure peace can't be contested. He smiled. You've earned it. By Friday, another envelope arrived, this one thick, embossed with a downtown firm's logo. Todd's name was printed in the upper left corner. Marilyn didn't even touch it. She left it on the counter until Ray stopped by later that afternoon. He recognized it immediately and sighed. Same dance, different song. Would you? She asked, gesturing toward it. He slid the letter into his briefcase without opening it. Returned to sender, unopened. Marilyn poured him a glass of iced tea. You're getting good at this. He smiled faintly. You're teaching me restraint. They clinked glasses gently, the sound small and decisive. That evening, the sky went lavender at the edges, the kind of color that reminded her of still water and early peace. She sat in the garden, a blanket over her knees, watching sparrows dart among the lilies. The scent of earth and green life carried on the breeze. No bitterness rose in her, no ache, no need to rewrite anything or explain herself again. Every word worth saying had already been said, or written for someone who'd earned the right to read it. A bird landed on the garden fence, head tilted as if studying her. Beautiful, aren't you? She murmured. The sparrow fluttered once, then took off, vanishing into the dusky air. Marilyn leaned back in her chair, her tea cooling in her hand. The house behind her glowed with warm light, steady, quiet, whole. On the table beside her sat one last envelope, unstamped and unsigned, its seal unbroken. It read only, "The copy I didn't send him." The wind caught the corner and lifted it slightly, as if urging her to let it go. Marilyn smiled and whispered, "Not tonight." The envelope settled back down, still and certain, just like her. The printer in Ray's office hummed softly as the final page slid into the tray. He adjusted his glasses, glanced over the document one last time, and smiled. "It's official," he said, turning toward Marilyn and Gloria, who sat across from his desk. "The trust is now recorded, filed, and published. It's in the public record as of 10 this morning." Marilyn studied the embossed letterhead and the firm's seal stamped in blue ink. Her name appeared at the top, bold, clean, undeniable. Gloria leaned over her shoulder. "Well," she said, grinning, "how's it feel to be officially untouchable?" Marilyn's eyes didn't waver from the document. "It looks accurate," she said simply. Ray chuckled, sliding the file into a folder. "That's about the highest praise I'll ever get from you." Gloria nudged her with an elbow. "You really are the steel under velvet." Marilyn smiled faintly. "I've been told that's not always a compliment." "Depends on who's doing the telling," Gloria said. "From me, it's gospel." They all laughed softly, an easy, contented sound that felt earned. That weekend, the house filled again, not with arguments or obligation, but with people who wanted to be there. Marilyn had invited the pantry volunteers for dinner, nothing formal, just a thank you for the months of laughter and work that had built something real. The backyard glowed under strings of soft golden lights. The table, long and simple, was set with mismatched dishes and mason jars, filled with fresh-cut lilies. The air smelled of roasted chicken and herbs, the kind of scent that wrapped around a person like memory. Lily stood by the porch, apron tied at her waist, slicing pie with the precision of someone determined to get it right. Her cheeks were flushed from the oven heat, and every so often she brushed a stray strand of hair from her face, smiling without realizing she was doing it. "Grandma," she whispered as Marilyn passed with a tray of bread. "They keep saying your garden looks like something out of a movie." Marilyn paused, glancing toward the rows of lilies swaying at the edge of the yard. "That's kind of them. Tell them I take my compliments in pie form." Lily giggled, the kind of laugh that still carried the lightness of childhood. "They already love you, Grandma." Marilyn's eyes softened. "Then they'll love you too. You made half of this dinner." "Maybe a quarter," Lily admitted. That's how it starts. The guests drifted between the yard and the porch, conversations rising and folding like music. Gloria poured wine and told stories, each one a little taller than the last, drawing laughter from even the quietest guests. Ray arrived late, carrying a bottle of champagne he insisted was legally required for milestones. He raised his glass as everyone gathered around the table. To Marilyn, he said, for proving that strength doesn't have to shout to be heard. To Marilyn, they echoed, the sound warm, genuine. Marilyn lifted her own glass, her voice steady but quiet. To showing up, she said, even when no one's looking. The toast held in the air, tender and whole. When the night wound down and the last of the guests had gone, Lily lingered to help wash dishes. The crickets outside sang beneath the hum of the porch light. "Grandma," she said softly, "can I tell you something?" "Of course. I think people finally see you the way I always have." Marilyn looked up from the sink, hands still wet, eyes shining just enough to betray her composure. "Then it was worth all the quiet years," she said. Lily smiled, hugged her, and slipped out into the warm night. The next morning, Marilyn sat at her desk, her planner open. The trust papers rested neatly beside it, stamped and complete. She reached for her pen and turned to the last page of her emergency contact list, the one she hadn't touched in years. Under primary contact, Todd Drake, she drew a single line through the name. Then she wrote, in careful cursive, Gloria Bennett. For a moment she stared at it, the ink still drying. The change felt small on paper, monumental everywhere else. Outside, the first light of dawn stretched across the garden, touching the lilies until they seemed to glow. Marilyn closed the planner, set her pen aside, and watched the sunrise through the window. She didn't feel triumph or loss or even finality, just a stillness that felt earned, like the quiet before a curtain rises. Somewhere in the distance, a car engine started, familiar, faint, and then gone again down the street. Marilyn smiled, almost imperceptibly. "Let them drive," she whispered. "The road doesn't end here." And as the light filled the room, she reached for her teacup and took a slow sip, ready for whatever quiet would come next. The morning light fell soft across the kitchen table, catching on the silver edges of Marilyn's reading glasses. She unfolded Lily's card for the third time that week, smoothing the creases carefully with her palm. The handwriting was still uneven, a mix of rounded cursive and teenage rush. "Grandma, thank you for teaching me what strength looks like when no one's clapping. I hope someday I'll be that brave." Marilyn's eyes lingered on the last word. Brave? Not strong, not kind, brave. She refolded the note with reverence, placed it inside a clear sleeve, and added it to the small lockbox in her desk, the same one that held her will, her letters, her photographs. The click of the latch sounded final, but not sad, just earned. That afternoon, the air smelled faintly of rain as she walked into the Maple Street food pantry, envelope in hand. Ruth looked up from her clipboard, smiling when she saw her. "Back again already? You know you can take a day off, Marilyn." Marilyn smiled, sliding the envelope across the counter. "This isn't work, it's closure." Ruth frowned playfully, accepting the envelope. "What's this?" "Donation paperwork," Marilyn said, "for the pantry and for the literacy program downtown, split evenly." Ruth's eyebrows lifted. "You're serious?" Marilyn nodded. "It's time to make sure good things keep going without needing my name attached." Ruth set the envelope down gently, emotion flickering across her face. "You know you've changed this place, right?" Marilyn smiled softly. "Then it's in good hands." They embraced briefly, the kind of hug that carried respect instead of pity. That evening, she sat at her desk again, this time with a leather-bound notebook and a stack of recipe cards worn thin from decades of use. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon and ink. She wrote slowly, each title deliberate. Frank's Sunday roast, Lily's first cookies, the shortbread that saved a day. Under each, she added notes, not just measurements, but stories. Frank always burned the edges. Lily said this smelled like comfort. This one taught me patience. By the time she closed the book, her hands ached slightly, but her heart didn't. It felt steady, anchored. The world outside her window had gone dark, the lilies faintly silver in the moonlight. She wrote one final line on the inside cover before setting the pen down. For Lily. Because love, like dough, rises best when tended. 2 days later, Gloria arrived, carrying something folded and wrapped in brown paper. "Don't look at me like that," she said, grinning as Marilyn raised an eyebrow. "You're impossible to shop for," Marilyn chuckled. "I didn't know we were celebrating anything." Gloria unwrapped the bundle and held it up, a handmade quilt, stitched in deep blues and soft creams. The pattern was intricate but calm, like the night sky after a storm. "It's for you," Gloria said. "Every square is from leftover fabric. The apron you wore at the pantry, the old curtains from the guest room, even that ridiculous floral blouse you hated." Marilyn ran her fingers along the seams, tracing the careful lines of thread. "It's beautiful," Gloria smiled. "You stitched back your power, Mar. I just made sure it stayed warm." Marilyn looked up, eyes bright. "It only frayed because I let them tug." Gloria's smile softened. "And look at you now, whole again." They sat together under the quilt, the quiet between them as comforting as the weight of the fabric itself. A week later, Marilyn received a call from Lily. "Grandma, guess what?" Her voice was bright, breathless. "My painting won the county art fair. It's going to hang in City Hall for a month." Marilyn laughed, the sound warm and full. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. What did you paint?" "The garden," Lily said. "Your garden. I called it Inheritance. The dedication says, 'For my grandmother's garden, where everything grows when you stop asking for permission.'" Marilyn pressed a hand to her chest, eyes glistening. "That's quite a title." Lily giggled. "Guess I learned from the best." After they hung up, Marilyn walked to the window. The quilt draped over her shoulders. The lilies outside swayed gently, their petals glowing in the evening light. For the first time in years, she saw her life reflected back not as something survived, but something built. She whispered toward the open air, not to anyone living or gone. Bravery was never loud. It just had to last. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, Marilyn stood in her quiet house, the air thick with the scent of lilies and lemon oil, the sound of distant laughter still echoing through the garden she'd finally reclaimed. The afternoon light slanted low across the cul-de-sac, soft and gold, when Marilyn heard the knock on her screen door. It was her neighbor, Joyce, retired nurse, local gossip, the kind who meant well even when her curiosity outpaced her tact. "Hope I'm not intruding," Joyce said, leaning against the doorframe. "I saw you out here pruning and thought I'd say hello." Marilyn smiled politely. "You never intrude, Joyce. You gather intelligence." Joyce laughed, unoffended. "Guilty." "Speaking of intelligence, I ran into Todd at the hardware store yesterday. He was talking like he's downsizing. Said something about waiting on money to clear. You know anything about that?" Marilyn's pruning shears clicked softly against the stems. She didn't look up. "No," she said. "And neither does he." Joyce hesitated, sensing the line she'd tiptoed across. "Well," she said finally, "I'm sure he'll figure himself out." "I'm sure he will," Marilyn said, setting the shears aside. "We all do, eventually." Joyce nodded awkwardly, then excused herself, retreating down the sidewalk with her tote of half-spilled groceries. The breeze carried her muttered small talk away like loose petals. When the yard fell silent again, Gloria's voice came from behind her. "Some people spend futures they never earned." Marilyn turned, smiling as Gloria crossed the yard, balancing 2 coffees. "Eavesdropping again?" "Listening," Gloria said, handing her a cup. "Big difference." Marilyn took a sip. The coffee was strong, the way she liked it. "He's probably still waiting for something that's already gone." Gloria nodded. "You don't sound angry anymore." "I'm not," Marilyn said. "Mine's already spent, just not on him." They stood together, looking over the garden where the lilies shimmered in the light. For once, the silence between them wasn't heavy. It was content. Later that afternoon, Marilyn walked through the house, a slow and deliberate journey through each room. The air held a faint scent of lemon oil and old wood. In the living room, the light filtered through lace curtains, painting shadows across the worn armchair where Frank used to sit. She ran her hand over the fabric, still smooth, still sturdy, and smiled faintly. The kitchen counters gleamed. The pantry shelves were organized in perfect order, her life reduced and refined to what mattered. There were no secrets left in drawers, no paperwork waiting for signatures. Upstairs, she paused by the door of the guest room. Lily's laughter still seemed to live there, hovering just under the hum of the ceiling fan. A single framed photo sat on the dresser, Lily's painting, the one she'd titled Inheritance. The brushstrokes looked softer now, the colors deeper. Marilyn's chest filled, not with sorrow, but with something gentler. Safety. The feeling she'd been chasing for nearly half a century, finally finding her in her own home. As the sun began to dip, she made her way to the garage. Dust hung in the light that slanted through the half-open door, particles dancing in the glow. The air was cool and faintly metallic. Frank's old toolbox sat on the workbench, red paint chipped, latch slightly bent from years of use. Inside, everything remained as he'd left it. The worn wrench set, the scuffed tape measure, the small level with its trapped bubble of green. She touched the handle of the hammer, his favorite one, the one he'd used to hang every shelf, build every frame, repair every broken hinge. "You fixed everything but us," she murmured. The words didn't sting. They just existed, suspended in the air between memory and release. She began closing each drawer one by one, the soft metal clinks marking the end of something she no longer carried. When she reached the top, she lingered over the final compartment, running her fingers along the smooth edge before pressing the lid shut. The latch snapped into place. Final and sure. Inside, she sat at her desk, opening her journal one last time. The page was crisp, untouched. She uncapped her pen and wrote, in steady hand, "I can die with peace. I lived with purpose." She looked at the sentence for a long time, then underlined peace twice. Outside, the lilies swayed in the last light of day, their petals catching the glow like small lanterns. Marilyn rose, set her pen aside, and stood at the window. The house was quiet, safe, complete. In the distance, thunder rolled softly, a storm promising to wash the world clean. Marilyn smiled. Let it rain. And as the first drop hit the glass, she turned off the light and left the journal open on the desk, its words glimmering faintly in the fading gold. The letter arrived in a pale blue envelope, the kind with a college seal stamped in the corner. Marilyn recognized Lily's looping script instantly, half careful, half impatient. She carried it to the kitchen, sat by the window, and opened it with the edge of her thumb. "Grandma, the dorm is small but warm, and the girls here already know your cookie recipe because I can't stop bragging about it. Thank you for the care package, the photo of the gardens on my desk. It makes the room feel bigger. You showed me that love isn't automatic. It's chosen. I choose you, always. Love, Lily." Marilyn's hand trembled slightly as she folded the letter back into its envelope. The paper still smelled faintly of campus air, printer ink, detergent, and the hopeful scent of new beginnings. She set it on the table beside her tea, staring out the window where the afternoon sunlight turned everything soft and familiar. Then she rose and began to assemble a new box, a smaller one this time. A batch of shortbread cookies, cooled and wrapped in wax paper. A single square of Gloria's quilt, carefully cut from the corner patterned in blues and creams. And a note, written in her small, steady hand. Still here. She sealed it, wrote Lily's name in even letters, and smiled. Outside, the garden was alive in full color. The lilies reached tall, their petals open wide to the sun, while forget-me-nots crept along the edges like delicate punctuation marks. Rosemary grew thick by the steps, sturdy, fragrant, meant to last. Marilyn knelt, brushing soil from her gloves, the air filled with the faint hum of bees and the distant sound of a neighbor's mower. Each plant felt like a chapter she'd written herself. The lilies for Frank's quiet promises. The forget-me-nots for Lily's laughter. The rosemary for remembrance, not regret. When Gloria arrived, she found Marilyn already steeping tea on the porch. "Smells like spring got an early start," Gloria said, sinking into the wicker chair across from her. "It did," Marilyn replied. "Everything came back stronger this year." Gloria studied her face for a moment, the calm in her expression, the easy grace of her movements. "Any regrets?" Marilyn stirred her tea once, twice, then set the spoon down. "Just that I waited so long," Gloria nodded. "Most people never stop waiting. You did." They sipped their tea in silence, the kind of quiet that needed no filling. Somewhere a bird sang, soft and persistent, and Marilyn found herself smiling. A few days later, an envelope slid through the mail slot, Ray's handwriting neat and formal across the front. Inside was a single-page letter on firm stationery. Marilyn, I wanted to confirm everything is finalized. Estate officially closed as of this morning. No contest was filed, no appeals possible. Consider it done, forever. Congratulations. You did this exactly right. Ray Marilyn exhaled slowly, the kind of breath that feels like it's been waiting years to leave. She folded the letter neatly and tucked it into her journal between the last page she'd written and a pressed lily petal she'd kept there for luck. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the clock and the soft rush of wind against the windows. She walked to the garden door and stepped outside barefoot, the wood of the porch warm under her feet. The air smelled of rain about to fall. The sun was slipping low now, the sky awash in deep gold and rose. She sat on the old bench by the garden's edge, quilt draped over her lap, and watched the light bend across the yard. For a moment she felt him there, Frank standing just behind her shoulder, silent but steady, as if the years had folded back to when they'd first built this house together. Look, she whispered, her voice soft but sure. It finally grew the way it was meant to. The wind stirred the lilies, bending them toward her in gentle applause. Marilyn tilted her head back, letting the last of the sunlight touch her face. A peace deeper than stillness settled inside her, the kind that doesn't announce itself, it just stays. She closed her eyes, smiled faintly, and thought of Lily's letter, of Gloria's laughter, of the pantry still humming with life. Everything she'd given had outlived the taking, and when the first drops of twilight began to fall, she whispered her last entry aloud, half truth, half triumph, all her own. At my husband's funeral, my son said, I won't take care of you, Mom. I have my own family now. I just nodded because I already knew my lawyer would take care of everything he thought was his. The sky dimmed, the lilies bowed, and somewhere in the quiet between day and night, Marilyn Drake smiled into the fading light, finally entirely free.